Welcome to Paul's Heart. I'm Paul, author of the book Paul's Heart Life as a Dad and a 35-year cancer survivor, available on Amazon. As we approach Father's Day, I'm getting ready for two very important VIPs on their way down here now. The best part of my cancer survivorship for the last 23 years has being a dad and actually being a girl dad. I love that. Um, I honestly feel that between father and daughter, there's this unconditional bond. I've loved watching these two grow into their own. I often compare it to planting a tree or planting a flower. And some days you notice it growing really quick, some you barely notice at all, but it's still growing. And that's been the way it has been, with my daughters. Um, I've enjoyed seeing the world through their eyes, seeing different perspectives. As adults, we have a lot of pressures on us, and we can be quite rigid and firm in what we believe and what we see. And all it takes is somebody else's perspective, especially somebody so innocent, not tainted by the decades of politics and vile things that have been done and said over the years. That innocence has made a difference in how I see things in the world. Of course, something I wasn't really experienced in myself as a child because we weren't this way, but I wanted to be different. And I made that a conscious effort with my daughters. Natural affection. My daughters hear from me constantly, I love you, and I hear it from them. The hugs, there's no doubt whatsoever that my daughters love and my love for them is unconditional. There's no transactions involved. I love them. End of stop. Same with my daughters. They love me. End of story. Um, I take tons of pride in all of their accomplishments, whether it's the summer police camp that they participated in. As my daughter reminded me, her triathlon that she did in elementary school, that was really cool. Other things, piano recitals, martial arts training, all the things. Everything that they've participated in, they've given everything they had to it, and they've taken a lot of pride themselves when they did it. Um, but sometimes it's just the simple everyday moments. The conversations, the meals that we have each other with each other, and we're gonna have this weekend. Some of the inside jokes, and sometimes it's just the phone calls. I get them oftentimes unexpectedly, and it's usually just to say hi. They're thinking of me. Yeah, sure, I may get an occasion. Hey, can you? And that's fine. Now being a girl dad, it does have its embarrassing moments at times. Um, the makeup or the makeovers and dress ups. Honestly, I didn't have to do that. My daughters never approached me about it. They were actually pretty happy going off on their own, with their little dresses that they had. Nobody did any fingernail painting in the house, and that just was because it didn't happen. Imaginative play, yeah, I held my share of dolls with them and did their tea parties and stuff like that. Um, Probably the harshest thing for me was being corrected on fashion. Now, I'm not a big fashion guy, but to have your children, even a preteen, try to tell you that doesn't really look good, can hurt. It can sting a little bit. Um, there's the blunt honesty. Kids are more likely to tell you the way it is. Um, I get funny selfies every now and then. Usually, it's one of these angles. I'm getting the top of their heads or something like that, and it's really just to give them a little reminder. Hey, I'm still here. I'm thinking about you. Um, one of the hardest things for me to accept was that there came a time that I was considered no longer cool. Had nothing to do with driving the loser cruiser, as I called it, which was a family van. I was told I had to give up my rock cred because I was driving a family van. But later on in my older daughter's college life, she had some roommates who reinstated my coolness when they found out the music legacy that I had in my history. That all of a sudden made it cool. Um, the hard thing for being a dad is understanding that you can't fix everything. You want to. You watch them get hurt, whether it's a knee scrape, whether it's a broken friendship, a relationship. I'll never forget. Never mind, I can't do that. Anyway, you have to let go, and that's one thing. Being a divorced father, um, having visitation or custody visits actually kind of prepared me for these days as they are adults, knowing that I wouldn't see them as often as I did when married, seeing them every day. Um, so now I'm at the point, as far as with them being adults, I get to see them you know, every maybe 2, 3 times a year, um, along with the phone calls or whatever. Um, Letting them make their own choices. They'll come to me for support and advice, and they'll either follow it, which I always recommend, or they'll throw caution to the wind and do what they want anyway. Like they say, you can't learn if you don't make mistakes. So my goal is to hopefully minimize those. Um, the one thing that I always said when I became a dad and before that was I always wanted better for them. I wanted better for them than I had growing up. I wanted better for them um, as when I started with my life. Um, it's not exactly easy because of some of the things that have happened over the last 10, 14 years. Um, but I still, to this day, want them to have better than I did. So there have been a couple embarrassing situations. I mean, nothing like a girl dad trying to find feminine hygiene products for their daughters. Of course, as I mentioned, I was divorced, so when it came to custody visits, I always had to be cautious. I mean, my daughters were slightly older; they were approaching their teen years at that point. I had to be cautious for any kind of false accusations being lobbed my way. So I made sure that precautions were taken, that couldn't happen. For instance, when it came time for them to get ready at night, um, I stood outside my apartment so that they could have their privacy. When they were younger and, you know, there were no, I changed my share of diapers, and I also had to take my kids into restrooms. Um, and that's what's going to give me a segue into this next thing. I know most of you have probably seen that horrible video of the girl dad who simply took his daughters into a woman's restroom on the way from Florida to Mississippi for his father's visitation. And some busybody jerk opened up the door, saw the father in there with his daughters, and then proceeded to call the cops. Well, fortunately, I mean, I give that dad a lot of credit. He stayed cool, even though his daughters were obviously getting upset by the way the man was talking and threatening and calling the police. Um, Fortunately, when the police came, they did diffuse the situation and then rewarded that jerk with a fine for wasting police resources. And then the father proceeded on his way, to Oklahoma to hopefully spend a very wonderful Father's Day with his daughters as he deserves. Look, no father wants to take his daughters into a men's room. We know what it's like in there. Okay, the guy knocked on the door. There was nobody in the women's restroom. He took his daughters in there. End of story. This guy opened up the door because his wife was in a wheelchair, and it was okay for him to go in there with her, evidently, but not for this dad with his two kids. Wrong. The father did nothing wrong. And unfortunately, those two little girls had to see that happen. But I'm glad the story ends happy. Dad's home with his daughters, and that's all that matters. Until next time, this is Paul's Heart. Hope everybody has a good Father's Day. I know I will.